Welcome to the Knowledge for Men show. Your life will never be the same.
Your level of success will seldom exceed your level of personal development.
I want to die empty of regret. I want to die empty of my best work. We don't understand who we are. Instead, we're living out somebody else's narrative.
What one man can do, another man can do. If it's been done, it can be done again.
Being yourself and being your truest, most authentic self in every moment. If it scares you or makes you a little afraid, do it. Follow your heart and your gut.
The first stage, I think, is finding you, like finding out who I am today.
Stuff will not work. You will have things that fail. Success is when you're a happy, fulfilled person. How do you define success?
It's your life, and you are the creator of the movie script that is your life story.
So many of you over the last 3 months have been asking me questions through email about not just becoming a stronger grounded man, but also about how I built my online freedom business. You see, I used to be broke, sleeping on my brother's couch with only $15 to my name, to now having a top-ranked men's podcast on iTunes. I'm a 3-time Amazon best-selling author. I sell out events where men come from around the world to attend my powerful trainings, and I'm working with amazing clients one-on-one. I share exactly what I would do if I was going to start over in this free training on becoming an influencer at kfminfluence.com. Again, that's kfminfluence.com. This will get you in the game, save you thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours of trying to figure all of this out on your own. This is the stuff people charge for, but I'm giving it to you for free at kfminfluence.com. All right, guys, welcome to the show. I'm here with John Warrillow, the founder of the Value Builder System, author of best-selling books Built to Sell, The Automatic Customer. He's been recognized by B2B Marketing as one of the top 10 business-to-business marketers in the United States. He's also started and exited 4 companies. You can look at his company, Value Builder System, at valuebuilder.com. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Andrew. Good to be here.
All right, John. And we start off every show with a favorite quote or some sort of saying that's helped you on your journey. What do you got for us, and what does that mean to you?
So I'm a big fan of the quote by Theodore Roosevelt, and you may have even heard of it. It's called "In the Arena."
Absolutely,
yeah. It just talks about kudos go to the guy who tries, right? So it doesn't have to be the person who's successful, but it's the one who tries. I think I'm going to distill it down, but it's something like, it's not the critic who counts; it's the man who's in the arena. It's a full paragraph, but to me, it kind of relates because I think so much of entrepreneurship is less thinking, more doing. It's instead of like spending another hour poring over your business plan, why don't you go talk to somebody about your idea and see if you can get them to buy? And it's just, I think the credit goes to the guy in the arena.
The one who tries, not the one who succeeds here all the time.
Yeah, the one who tries. I mean, I've heard it described as looking at entrepreneurship through a lens of success. Oftentimes, you can feel like a bit of a failure if all you do is look at magazine covers, right? And then someone told me, I can't remember who it was, but imagine like an artist. And imagine you take like a lifespan of 30 or 40 years of being an artist, and you put their 8 best songs together in a compilation, and you put together a best of album. The same is true of entrepreneurship. I mean, if you look at these famous entrepreneurs, Richard Branson, whatever, if you actually just look at the success stories, you're really just seeing their best of. There are so many failures underneath the surface that we don't hear about, right? And it can make you feel very small consuming a lot of these stories without the context of all the failures.
Yeah, ironic, right? A lot of the motivation books, a lot of the different podcasts, even this podcast, perhaps, you hear a lot of the success of individuals, and it doesn't always capture the failures, the mistakes, the sacrifices, the struggle that was necessary to hit those successes. And if all you see is successes, but all you're experiencing in your life is mistakes and challenges and struggle, then there's a gap there.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, it sounds trite even saying it, but it's something I tell my kids all the time. It's not what happens, it's how you react to what happens, right? And I mean, it's so true. I guess stereotypes become stereotypes because they have some meaning.
Absolutely. So recognized as one of the top 10 business to business marketers in the US. When I say that in the intro, like, were you always on this trajectory? Did you grow up just one of those guys always involved in entrepreneurship business? Was this the path that you saw yourself going down?
Well, that quote is an interesting how that happened. I used to run a company where we worked with very large Fortune 500 marketers. So American Express, Microsoft, eBay, PayPal were all subscribers of ours. And we helped them reach and understand the small, medium business market. And so because we as a company were advising all these brands about how to reach small business owners, and because I was the founder of the company, that's how that kind of quote came about. Weird sort of, I don't think of myself as that at all. I think there's so many better marketers out there, but that's how that came about, because I was probably riding on the coattails of all these big brands that were using our service.
Maybe you're being really humble, but you've got, you've exited 4 companies, you got best-selling books in the area of business. Maybe you're being a little humble here, but talk us through, like, how did you get started with entrepreneurship and business, and what led you down this path?
So I used to work in radio. So when I first started out, I was working at a radio station, and I was one of those closet entrepreneurs that would, kind of talk about ideas. And I had this idea for a radio show. It's funny now, everything goes full circle. It was to interview entrepreneurs and ask them how they did it. Basically, the whole format of the show was kind of, if you had it to do over again, what would you do differently?
Yeah. There's a lot of that going on.
Yeah. This is going back now, though, like, to the early 90s when you still listen to audio books on tape, if you can believe it.
Wow.
So a lot of your listeners are going, tape? What the hell is tape?
No,
tape
there's older guys on the show. but yeah.
In any event, so kind of left the station to put this show on the air, and ultimately got it syndicated nationally. And that was one of the most incredible experiences, because not only it was my first entrepreneurial experience, and I was making all kinds of mistakes, but what I was learning was the sort of tips and tricks of all these amazing entrepreneurs who, because we were nationally syndicated, we had an audience, we could say, look, you're going to be heard by 5 million people. We could get really good guests. And so I would ask them, like, what would you do differently if you had to do over again? And I mean, I got these pearls of wisdom. If I think back now and I think about, like, the education I got from all these entrepreneurs, I'm completely underachieving their advice, because they were giving me these morsels of wisdom over a lifetime. And so that was really my education in entrepreneurship, was from these interviews.
And how long did that last for?
3 years. So it was a daily show interview.
Oh, wow. Daily.
Every day.
So we're talking almost 1,000 interviews. Is that right? Daily?
Yeah. Yeah, by the end of it, every week. Sorry, it was every weekday. So call it
every weekday. Okay, that's still a lot. It's still a lot of interviews there to do it daily, and 5 million people. Did you ever think, who was I to be interviewing all these people?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, but it was never a peer-to-peer interview. Like, I was never trying to come off as like, well, let me, let's sit around the campfire and let me tell you my stories. Like, it wasn't like that at all. It was like, I was very deferential to them, but probably even sycophantic. I was, you are on a pedestal. I want to learn from you, share with me a little bit. So I didn't come across as being their peer in any way. I was definitely their student, and trying to be a conduit to the audience, right? So the audience wanted to learn from them, and I was just asking questions. The audience hoped. A lot of people ask, how do you ask good questions? And one of the things I try to remember, when I do anything like moderating a panel or whatever, is I'm there as the advocate for the audience, right? So the audience of 200 or 2,000 doesn't have a voice. They don't have a way to communicate directly to this person, and so that is your job, is to ask the questions they want to know.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of that going on. And I think right now the audience is wondering, what were those common pearls of wisdom that you heard from these, let's just say 600, 700 interviews that you did with high performing individuals?
Oh my God, there's so many. One comes to mind really quickly. There's a guy named Greg Clark, and Greg, I don't know if you know the name or not, but he started a company called College Pro Painters, which was a $40 million company at the time. He wanted to sell the business, and really, really interesting guy, right up from the bootstraps. Started off painting people's houses, obviously as a college student, and built out a whole franchise system and so forth. So kind of a really interesting, successful guy. And I asked him sort of, what did you learn over the decades? And he said, I wish I had not gotten so high on the highs and so low on the lows. And I remember that really sticking with me. And I think, there's something to be said for entrepreneurship and riding that emotional roller coaster. I don't know if we're more likely to be sort of manic depressives. I think I've seen some research. In fact, I have seen research to suggest we are much more likely statistically to be ADHD. So, struggling with some mild forms of different mental illness. And so I think there's a fair body of evidence to suggest that entrepreneurs are inclined to be more kind of ramped up on the highs, but also hit these troughs really hard. And I remember him saying, it's never as good as it feels on the best day, and it's never as bad as it feels on the worst day.
I think that can apply to anyone listening. If they're in a job, if they're in a relationship, the high on the highs. So you're meaning you had a great week or a great month or a great quarter and you're on cloud 9, and then all of a sudden there's a bad month or a bad week, a bad quarter, and you're falling into depression. You really take the lows very personal.
Yeah, I mean, because in many cases, entrepreneurship is a complete reflection of you, right? So you're out there, when someone says no to your company, chooses a different vendor, especially in the early days, it is a personal affront, right? Like it's like they're saying no to you, they're rejecting you. And so it can be very tough to have some separation from that. If you're Trevor Kalanick at Uber, for example, if somebody chooses Lyft over Uber, he's personally not getting offended by that anymore. He's got millions of rides a day.
Right.
But if you own a swimming pool retail store and there's another one across the street and you see one of your customers pull into the driveway across the street going to the other one, that feels personal. And so you do that, you have 10 or 15 of those kind of hits every day, and you can't help but take that personally, not to take that personally. So I think I'll always remember that guy, Greg Clark, and sort of, it's never as good as it feels on the best day, but it's also never as bad as it feels on the worst.
So what's the middle ground here?
Well, I think keeping, I don't know. I think keeping a big picture on what you're trying to do. I'm a very goal-oriented person. I've run an Ironman. I've written a couple books. I've started a few businesses. Like, give me a goal, and I'm, like that feels good for me. Yet, where I fall down is losing perspective on the why. Why am I doing? You've seen the Simon Sinek Start With Why stuff, right. I'm sure.
Yeah.
And I often forget and lose sight of that. And that's one of my biggest challenges. And the part of my life where I'm at now is I'm trying to start every day. I've started to meditate. I'm starting to try to really think about how is what we're doing helping people, as opposed to we've got to hit X metric today, and if we don't hit it by today, we're like the whole world comes to an end, which would have been my headspace maybe 10 years ago, where I would have just been like very goal-oriented, like I am going to put my head through this wall and there's nothing that's going to stop me. Like that's how I was 10 years ago, and now I'm like I'm much more inclined to. And I'm trying to get better at this. I haven't figured it out by any stretch, but when I feel like I'm hitting my head against a wall, I've got to pull up and say, wait a minute, like why am I doing this? Who are we helping? What's the big picture? And that helps me kind of get back, I hope, to some sense of sanity.
Oh, that's a big shift you had there, being very metric focused, it seems like very sales driven, looking at the charts, like we got to hit these numbers, got to hit these calls, etc. And now really looking at, well, why am I doing this? What led to that?
It's probably, there's probably something to do with ticking some of Maslow's hierarchy of needs somewhere along the line. So, when you're not worried about where the money for payroll is going to come or where your next meal is going to come, or like when you've ticked those boxes, so to speak, the need for a broader purpose, I think, kicks in. And I know what I haven't figured out, Andrew, and I'd be curious to your thoughts on this. What I haven't figured out is how you, in both sides of your brain, hold this idea that you're a super driven person, achievement oriented, give me a number, I'm going to hit it kind of person. And at the same time, be focused on sort of higher level thinking and what contribution I'm making in the world and why am I doing this? What I have found is when I get too soft and start thinking about the warm and fuzzies and the higher purpose and like what's going to be on my tombstone, all that crap, I lose my focus on my numbers and suffer. And so I toggle between okay, this month it's going to be all about the numbers, right? We're going to hit these 5 goals and nothing's going to stop us. And then at 3/4 of the way through the month, I feel like, oh my God, I got to pull up again. So what I haven't figured out is to keep those ideas mutually, in the same breath. I think I can do both independently, but I can't figure out how to be super ambitious and at the same time super focused on the big picture. That's one that I've got to work on.
Yeah. And so what do you think you can do to really own that?
I don't know. I'm starting to meditate, which sounds corny, I know. I told my wife that the other day, and she's like, "You're what?"
I think it's more accepted today than ever. It's not viewed as like you have to be this, spiritual person to do that. But it's very common because the results are there. The results are almost proven by so many very successful people who are big promoters of it. What have you been finding with meditation?
what I've learned so far, and it's been 5 days, so let's keep things in perspective here. not like some,
all right, you don't have years under your belt here, but 5 days under your belt here. What's it look like?
Yeah, so in the first 5 days, what I've learned in the first 5 days is my mind spends a lot of time at a high frequency of just like ideas coming in and out of my brain. And in the first few days of meditating, you kind of just, I have been tuned into, oh my gosh, my mind is always, ideas are flying in and out all over the joint, some of which I react to. And I've just started to kind of realize that there's this kind of crazy, I don't know, dance club in my brain with all these ideas ping-ponging around without having sort of been aware of that in the past. Sometimes, so the first few days, talk to me, let's talk in a month or in a year, and I'll let you know what I've learned. But right now it's just becoming mindful of that, just the ping-ponging around in my brain of all these ideas.
Do you think it's something you're going to keep up with?
It is. Yeah. I do have a good ability to kind of keep habits. It's one, I've got lots of weaknesses and flaws, but one strength is the ability to kind of pick a habit and stick to it. So
I think that's a huge key for anyone with goals to have habits. What role has having habits played in your success in business?
I think it's been pretty important. Somewhat early. I remember boss when I worked in radio, this is going back 20 years or so. And he talked to me. I can't remember if he used Stephen Covey or whether he was just, I later became aware of Stephen Covey and realized that the ideas were sort of very similar. But Stephen Covey, the kind of huge, uber successful thinker, First Things First and 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of the things he talks about is you've got to put the big rocks in first. So if you spend all your time on the little stuff, you're just going to piss away all your day. And so I think probably one of the big habits that I've used for many years now is figure out what the big rock is for the day, in particular a creative project, and do that first thing in the morning. Try not to look at email, but really think about the first big sort of 60 or 90 minutes of the day. So today, for example, I'm working on a presentation I've got to give on Thursday. So I've got a PowerPoint presentation, and instead of grab my coffee and start to go through emails, the first thing I'm doing is this PowerPoint presentation. And because that's the big kind of creative thing. Because I don't know about you, Andrew, but by the time this time of the day, it's 3:00 Eastern as I'm doing this recording, like my mind is shot. Like you're lucky that I've been able to string together a few sentences. So
I'm lucky. Oh man, yeah. The audience is like, oh, I'm glad he's got it going. Yeah. So
usually in the morning, I've got maybe a 60 to 90 minute window to sort of create something, and then beyond that, it's just execution mode. I just become quite a bit like more execution, like responding to things, doing things, but my creativity is pretty much shot by then.
Are you a 5 o'clock guy?
You mean what time do I leave the office?
What time are you? I meant in the mornings is what I meant.
Oh,
are you
I'm
waking
sorry.
up?
Okay.
Are you waking up at 5 in the morning? Are you up at it? What's your daily routine look like?
So not really. I don't use an alarm clock unless I'm flying somewhere. So it's generally body clock, but I'm generally up between 5:30 and 6. Over the last 5 mornings, it's meditate for a few minutes, 10 minutes, and then coffee and stuff like that. And then I try to pick up a project. Usually it's a creative project. It's either an article I've got to write or a deck I've got to do, like a presentation I've got to do, or a podcast or whatever, and work on that. And then we have a standing at our company. We have an 8:48 meeting every day. It's an 8:48 huddle. It's 8:48 because I want to reinforce the fact that it's 12 minutes and it's not 8:45. So people stroll in at 8:50 and expect the meeting not to have started yet. It's 8:48, so you show up on time. It's very precise. It's 12 minutes. It's done by 9. Got the idea from Vern Harnish. If you've ever had Vern on the show, Rockefeller Habits, just a great guy. Gazelles, if you know that company.
I've seen him speak. Yeah, scaling up.
So just a tremendous guy. Anyways, he's a big proponent of kind of daily rhythm. Anyway, so we do a daily rhythm, 8:48, and it provides some structure to my day. So the first chunk is really tries to be creative, and then I get to the office, do the 8:48, and then it's kind of into a regular work day at 9.
Nice. Yeah. So the routine, the habits, it seems like you're a big executioner where you're going to focus on what's important. You're not going to spend a lot of time on these. It's not that they're unnecessary, but you're going to eat that big frog first before you start going on to some of these other things throughout the rest of your day.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I had this little game where sometimes I will put an alarm on, like a timer on my iPhone. I'll put 20 minutes, for example, and I'll try to stack up all my emails that I've received all in the day, and I'll challenge myself to do them all in the 20 minutes on my iPhone. It's just a stupid game that I play with myself, but it's done intentionally so that I'm not.
Do you have incomplete sentences and?
Well,
what are those emails?
Yeah, I try to use one little tactic that I try to use. I learned from one of our advisors, a Dutch guy in Amsterdam, and he told me about yesable please. Have you ever heard of this
I haven't.
strategy? So it's an email strategy. So when employees will email you and they'll be like, "So we've got this angry customer. He wants a refund, and I'm not sure what to do." Right? This would be like an email.
Right.
And so basically taking their pile of stinking crap and giving it to you, saying like, you make the decision what you want to do. And so it's a one defense mechanism you can use against these kinds of assaults is a simple response, which is yesable please. And yesable refers to like, give me an email that I can respond with a yes or no. So rephrasing that might be, hey, we've got this customer. He's kind of pissed off. We dropped the ball in these 3 ways. I've thought about it from these 3 angles. We could maybe give him a refund. We could give him 1 month free service, or we could, ask him whatever, fill in the blank. And, I would like to give him 1 month free service. Are you okay with that? Easy for me to respond. Yes, no. And so I'm trying to train our team to use yesable, like pose questions if they need to pose a question in a yesable kind of way. It forces the rigor for them to take ownership of the challenge.
Yeah. So it kind of reduces emails too, because obviously it's a yes or no and there it's done. Now he executes.
Yeah. And going through the process of thinking it through, like, oh my God, I'm going to have to like phrase this in a yesable way. 9 times out of 10, they figure it out on their own. And so it's more of out of courtesy, like, and this is what I'm going to do. Let me know if you have, an issue with it, kind of thing.
So you've been in business a long time here. What would you say separates those who make it in business versus those who don't?
Well, I think those who don't think about it too much. Occasionally I'll be asked to look at a business plan or come up with an idea. And I try to take them seriously, but there's part of me in my mind that knows that whatever they're pitching right now is going to change so much from what actually becomes their business, that I kind of want to say, just do it, man. Like, get the first 10 customers and then go figure out what you're selling. Because it's so much changes. And I don't mean to sound impetuous. And I think there's a rule for planning, but planning is better when you have data. So, once you start to sell the product, you start to get some reaction to it, then you can start saying, oh my God, it's going to take, I just spent 40 hours and I got 2 customers, which means I can get one customer every 20 hours of selling, which means that, and then you can start to make some assumptions based on that. But if you're just sitting there with an Excel spreadsheet and you're putting like one assumption after another, it's just a house of cards. I remember Matt Meeker, I wrote about Matt's business. It's called BarkBox. Have you heard of BarkBox?
I haven't.
Okay, so BarkBox is a subscription-based dog treats. So they send dog treats off to dog parents as opposed to dog owners. Dog parents care so much about the dogs.
Right.
And so Matt Meeker had this idea. Matt Meeker, the guy behind Meetup, he was thinking about it. And before he built the company, hired us from first employee, created a website, all that stuff, he basically took a Stripe app on his phone, and he went to a dog park where he walked his dog every day. And he basically interviewed dog owners, people he knew, and he said, look, I'm thinking of starting this company. I'm going to send a monthly box out. It's going to have dog treats and dog bones. It's going to cost about $20 a month. Is that something you'd be interested in? And they say yes or no. If no, why? If yes, great. Give me your credit card. I'll sign you up right here. And he literally started signing people. And that was his acid test, right? Because anybody will say, oh yeah, your idea is great.
Right. Until they hand over a credit card or cash.
Yeah. It hasn't, one of the worst ideas you could possibly do is ask your friends to react to your business idea.
Uh-huh. Why is that?
Well, because everybody says, yeah, it's a great idea.
Yeah.
What is a much more compelling strategy is to actually go to your target customer and you've seen the lean startup stuff. You go with basically a straw man or a skeleton or like a 1-page description of the product,
right,
and basically ask somebody to buy. And you'll know pretty quick if you've got an idea. If somebody says, yeah, I will buy that now. That's when you know.
What comes first, the product, and then you find the audience for that product, or building the audience and then asking them what they need?
Great question. The common answer would be, find out, figure out your target market, figure out what they want, understand their needs, so forth. I'm less of a believer in that, to be honest, because I think it leads businesses to be too customer driven. And I know that sounds completely counterintuitive, but when you're too customer driven, you don't have an anchor. You don't have an idea that you're driving towards. I mean, this is again a bit trite, but Steve Jobs, nobody knew that they wanted 1,000 songs in their pocket before Jobs figured out the iPhone or the iPod. And I think the same is true for a lot of products. If you spend all your time asking customers, like, how would you like your music and what would you like it to do? And it's very difficult for customers to invent products. I think that's the rule of an entrepreneur. I mean, your job is to figure out a problem in the marketplace and develop a solution to it. And sometimes I think that comes with customer input, but oftentimes it doesn't. And I think if you're just spending your time listening to customers, they can say the same stuff to you as they do to everybody else, and I think it can lead to products that are very me too, very reactionary,
hard to innovate.
Yeah. And so
Henry Ford, he says, so they asked him like, hey, if I would ask my customers what they'd want, they say I want a faster breed of horse, versus an affordable car, which is what he came out with.
Yeah, another classic example. So I think, there's something to be said for, I'm constantly telling my kids, like, walk around your day and ask yourself, what would make this situation better? Like, you're playing baseball with your buddies on the schoolyard, and what would make it better? Like, would it be a better ball? Like maybe one that didn't hurt as much when you hit yourself with it? Or would it be a bat with a bigger barrel so you could hit it farther? What would make the situation better? When you're in the lineup at 5 guys, like how could this lineup be run more smoothly, more efficiently, so to get more people through? Like, what would make this better? And just kind of, it can be a bit annoying, but if you're going through, I'm sure I'm very annoying to them, but if you could just go through your life asking yourself at every turn, what would make this better? I think that's when people kind of discover cool ideas.
So for all the listeners just looking around, your next idea could be that problem that you keep having at the office, or that problem that you keep having with your car or the commute, or maybe you wish this app would do this certain thing, but there's opportunities all around you. If we're listening here to what John says, which is really putting on that lens of looking for all the opportunities in front of you and seeing these problems in life as opportunities potentially for a successful business.
One of the big mistakes I think people make, Anders, is trying to create some revolutionary product that has never existed before. Flying car as an example, although I'll give Elon Musk a few years before he creates that.
I was going to say, he's breaking a lot of those.
On my desk, there's a pencil, right? And I use like an HB pencil, the canary yellow pencil with the eraser on the end. I mean, we've all used them in school, whatever. And I find those break really easily. I find that the shaft of the wood isn't like strong enough to hold the lead inside. And so more often than not, maybe it's because I'm over holding them too tightly, but I find I break them a lot. And so if you could sell me like a shatter-proof pencil, or a pencil that's not going to break, or is less likely to break than the canary yellow HB pencil that we all grew up using and sharpening 50 million times, that would be compelling to me. And so the pencil is not a new idea. And I could use different examples, obviously the ruler, all kinds of different things. But what I'm suggesting we think about is what would make existing products just slightly better, as opposed to coming up with a flying car.
John, I'll sell you a mechanical pencil. It'll solve all your problems.
But then you got to stuff those. And then the problem is when you get the mechanical pencil, it comes with the lead, right? The 5 pieces of lead, right? So you're all good for the first. But who keeps that tube? Only the most OCD people I know keep that.
Or
tube.
they're reordering the lead on Amazon.
And then you reorder. Like, are you really going to like reorder it from Staples.com? And you know what thing? Like, no, you don't, right? I'm aware of mechanical pencils, but I never find the stupid tube or the sleeve of replacements when I need it. So anyways.
All right. And just to transition a bit here, John, how do you know when you're working on an idea, you have this idea that you really want to have happen, you've been working on it for a long time, you're not seeing the results that you'd like to have seen at this point, you've put in a lot of sweat equity. How do you know when you should pivot, or if you should give up on this and try something new, or if you should just keep going? What are some key indicators of when you should quit and when you should keep going?
I think a lot of it's intuition. You can have markers that help you. Doctors use markers all the time, right? So you've got a doctor will use a blood pressure marker, and they'll say, if your blood pressure goes over 140, that's a problem. If your cholesterol is over whatever, that's a problem. And so they're using these markers as a way to to try to predict a larger incident, right? Like a heart attack, as an example. And so, the heart attack is the catastrophic event that you want to avoid, and the markers are the things that you're hopefully trending towards. So when you look at your business, while you may not be getting the ultimate revenue that you're trying to achieve, are there markers that you could identify that would show progress? So for example, if you're in a B2B selling environment, for example, you might divide up your revenue into, okay, in order to get revenue, we've got to prospect, we've got to identify prospects, we've got to prospect and get meetings. From first meeting, we've got to get second meetings, and second meetings, we've got to close deals, right? So we're not closing deals. That's a problem. But let's all go all the way back to prospecting. How are we doing on prospecting? And if you're trending upwards in terms of prospecting, you're getting more inbound leads, you're finding more prospects out there, your salespeople are having more conversations, then you can say, okay, well, that's going okay. It looks like we've actually the problem is really not the prospecting in the entire business model. It just seems that we're falling flat at the first sales call. So let's try to re-engineer the first sales call, as opposed to kind of trying to focus on profits or revenue, which are sort of outcomes of an input. And so trying a little bit more focused on the inputs. The big one, I do a lot of writing about recurring revenue models and subscription models. The big one in subscription businesses is the LTV to CAC ratio. It stands for lifetime value to cost to acquire a customer. And so, whether it's Netflix or Amazon Prime or Joe's swimming pool company that has sort of a hassle-free chlorine replacement service, what you're trying to do is get a subscription so that the lifetime value of a subscriber is worth 3 times as much as it costs, at least, to acquire that customer. So, for example, at Netflix, if it costs $10, if you're getting $10 a month, this is a very simple example, but if you're getting $10 a month from a subscriber, so the lifetime or the annual value of that is $120. Let's say they stay for 5 years, so let's call it $600 lifetime value for an average Netflix subscriber. Netflix has to acquire subscribers for less than $200 each in order to have a viable business model.
Why not? So why not 400 and they make 100?
What's that?
Why is it 200? Because if they can make, what was it, 500 or 600? Why is it 200? Why is that the number?
It's got to be 3 to 1. So
okay. So there's a number for this. All right.
It's got to be a ratio of 3 times the lifetime value to 1. In other words, the cost to acquire a customer. So if it costs you $200 to acquire a customer, as an example, you better be getting at least $600 of value from that customer.
Is it not viable if it costs $450 to acquire a customer and you're only making $600? So that's $150 profit.
Yeah. So no, you'll end up chewing through too much cash in order to get to enough customers. So
I see.
You need because when we talk about lifetime value, we're usually talking about gross margin contribution. So for example, if you get from a subscriber $100 and you've got to spend $20 for every new subscriber you get, your gross margin contribution is actually $80. And so to do this math in a more scientific way, you'd look at gross margin contribution. So you'd actually look at the 80. And so you're not taking into consideration your cost to run the business. So you're just looking at the gross profit contribution of that new subscriber. So you're not taking into consideration your office costs.
Right, the team, the tech.
Yeah, all that stuff. So all that can be optimized, and you can figure out how to nip and tuck and make a profit. And the biggest mistake most subscription companies make is using their profit and loss statement as a way to measure their progress. Because in a subscription company, you're getting the lifetime value of your customer over time, yet a lot of the cost to acquire her happened in the first month. And so what you've got to do is have a different way to look at the viability of your company other than just a profit and loss statement, because it's the way accountants will express it. You'll almost always be losing money. You may have a very high potential subscription offering. So instead of looking at profit and loss as your metric, look at LTV to CAC ratio.
And for people who want to go deeper into this, I believe your book of The Automatic Customer would go deeper into this topic. Is that right?
Yeah, you can go really deep and look at
creating a subscription business in any industry, and so why are you you really push for the subscription business model? Why is that?
Well, it relates back to what we do here, and which is to work with entrepreneurs to help them improve their value. We've identified 8 factors that drive up the value of a company, and one of them is recurring revenue. And it's one of those ones that a lot of businesses don't really understand. So like if you're a software company, of course, you're going to sell it on a cloud-based SaaS model. If you're a media company, you're probably going to sell subscriptions. But if you are a home renovator, for example, you're probably not thinking recurring revenue. Yet when a company goes and buys your business, they're not going to spend any money money to buy your business if all your business goes out the door when you personally leave. So what you need to think through is recurring revenue. Jim Vagonis, a guy from Washington, D.C., figured this out when he started Hassle-Free Homes. He was a home contractor, sick of the kind of up and down cycle of business. And so what he did was create a home maintenance contract where for, I think it's $200 or $300 a month, you can have him manage your home, come and get rid of the filters, furnace filters in the spring, change them out, swap out the pool water, all that stuff, all those kind of honey-do list stuff. He will do them for you. And because he's built a recurring model of subscribers instead of having the kind of one-off construction work, his company is much more value if he ever wants to sell it. So it's really the challenge, I think, for a lot of companies is to figure out, how do I create recurring revenue in an industry that's not really known for recurring revenue? And that's what we talk a lot about.
I see. What would you say are the most common mistakes that entrepreneurs or business owners are making with their revenue models or with their products that they're selling?
Well, it's usually selling too much stuff to few people. So the way a lot of small businesses start out is they have a passion for something and they go sell a few customers. And the customers look into the whites of the eyes of the business and they go, wow, this guy or this gal really is passionate about this product, about this industry. And the customer says, you've been selling me widgets. What we really need are more grommets. Would you consider selling grommets as well as widgets? And the business owner, being a optimistic, opportunistic person, says, yeah, sure, I'm sure we can figure out, grommets. And pretty soon that conversation happens 3 or 4 more times. And the business owner is selling lots of different products and services to a very few set of customers, really loyal customers. And that's the definition of an unsellable company, right? Because once the owner leaves, the business is worthless. They can't train the employees on the products because there's too many of them. They're the industry guru, but they can't train their employees on being industry gurus, a lifetime of knowledge very quickly. And so they end up selling a lot of products to a few people. And again, that's the definition of an unsellable company. Whereas what you want to do is actually flip that 180 degrees in the other direction. And that is to sell a few products to lots of customers. And so that way your employees can get good at delivering them. You can get a brand reputation. It can be the thin edge of the wedge and actually carve out some space in somebody's mind about what you do. That's when companies will come in and acquire you. When like GoPro, as an example, was acquired, they had created the best technology for taking, action video, right? So if you're a snowboarder, you use a GoPro. You don't use like some 50 other different video cameras. And so they carved out a unique space in the world. And so selling one thing to lots of people, as opposed to what most business owners do, which is sell lots of things to a few people.
What would be another example of a company that sells few things to a lot of people and they're absolutely crushing it, and a company who sells a lot of things to very few people and they're trending down right now? I'm trying to think too.
Yeah, like a classic example of selling a lot of things to a few people would be anyone in the professional services space. So you pick any advertising agency on the planet, right? They will hold themselves up, whether it's Ogilvy and Mather or any of the big holding companies. They say, oh, we're an integrated marketing services company. You want digital marketing? No problem. You want SEO, SEM? We can do all that. You want to do a podcast? Sure, we can help you do that. You want to do radio, TV? So they're doing lots of different stuff for a few companies. And as a result, those like advertising agencies, when they sell to holding companies, they sell for nothing. They sell for generally 3 times EBITDA. The advertising agency buys the business, buys a small upstart agency on typically a 5 to 7 year earnout. They'll pay 3 times EBITDA up front and then another 7 times EBITDA if the entrepreneur stays on for 7 years. Can you imagine working for a corporate giant for 7 years if you're an entrepreneur? It just never happens. And so these advertising agencies generally trade for nothing, very, very low upfront, and 5-7 year lock-ins because they sell way too many things to a few businesses. The better side of that would be a company like W Promote. W Promote is based in Los Angeles. All they do is SEM, search engine marketing. And you can't get a radio ad produced by them. They don't do television. They don't do broadcast. They don't do newspaper ads. But if you want to do SEM, search engine marketing, you want to buy Google AdWords, that's their business. And they're one of the best at it in the world. So that's an example of 2 companies in a marketing communications industry, one taking a very generic approach, selling lots of things to a few customers, completely, not completely, but largely worthless company, compared to W Promote, which has recurring contracts that become recognized as SEM experts. When they trade, they'll trade at a very high premium, a very high multiple.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a restaurant that when you open the menu, and they sell Mexican food, they sell Italian food, they sell Mediterranean food, they sell pizza, and you're like how could they be good at all of these here? Like I like when I go into a restaurant, it's like boom, they have one piece of paper and they're probably going to be really good at the tacos. Or you go into a pizza place, all they sell is pizza. They don't sell pizzas and burgers, they sell pizza. I think a burger place I think it's on the East Coast now, Five Guys, they just sell burgers and fries. It's it. They're absolutely crushing it. Other places, there's a place called Pieology that's really blowing up. They just sell pizza. That's all that they sell. And they're just, I think simplicity can win the game.
Yeah, for sure. I read a blog post years ago now. I don't even know it's still around. It's called "No, You Cannot Have Chipotle Sauce on That," and it's basically the idea of the article. I was profiling this business called Weber's in Ontario in cottage country. It's this one restaurant on a highway up towards cottage country, Muskoka, like lake country, just north of Toronto, and they are killing it. They have been killing it for 25 years. And there's like lineups. You get there on a Friday night. There's like literally like hundreds of people deep, and they're incredible. And their menu is on one board. It's been on one board forever, and it is literally like hamburger, hot dog, French fries. Like their drink fountain thing is like, I think there's like orange, Coke, and Sprite.
Yeah,
if you want a Diet Coke or something like that. And like the point being, we make incredible burgers, but don't expect to come here and ask for, like a salad. That's not what we do.
I think that book, The Paradox of Choice, is kind of going into this topic here of when you have so many options. Like you go to a grocery store, you look at the cereal aisle, it's just an entire aisle of essentially the same cereals from different companies. And it's just, which one do I pick here? Or like chips, there's an entire aisle like of all the same chips with just different brands. It makes it hard to make a decision when there's so many options versus there's just a few options. I can simply grab one and go.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think you want to avoid the Chinese menu way of pricing whatever service or product you have, and just saying, look, we have three options that we work with customers, and it's what we do at my company. We have three different licensing options, and we're not giving you 50 million ways. You can't customize it. These are the three. And I can remember in my last company, we did market research, as I mentioned earlier, and I remember when we started selling a subscription, we fell down the slippery slope of starting to customize each subscription in an effort to win the business. We'd hear from a customer like, I really like your subscription, but if, maybe you could just cut the data in this way for us, just us. And, the first time we said, sure, no problem. We're a young entrepreneurial company. But by the seventh or eighth person who asked us to customize the product, we were essentially doing a custom project for each customer, and we lost all the economics of the business. There was no kind of scale to it, and it all fell apart on this kind of desire for customization. So I'm a big believer in saying, no, this is the way we do it. Like we're the experts. There's a reason we chose to do it in this way. You're the customer. You're not necessarily, you haven't spent 20 years in this industry understanding what we do, making these widgets, all the different ways that we do it. So no, you can't dictate to us how we're going to make our widget. You come to us because we make the world's best widget. So like, just sit back and let us sell you the world's best widget. And I'm a huge believer in that.
So you're willing to lose some customers in that regard in order to hold your ground or hold what you're doing to a higher regard?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, the dirty secret is you don't usually lose that many customers by standing your ground, right? You say, if you can do it in a professional manner, most customers your status with them will elevate. I won't say the person's name, but we're working with a supplier right now who is clearly over their head a little bit on this project, and they are constantly asking us for our opinion on how they should do the project. And it's so infuriating because we've hired them, obviously mistakenly in this case, to do a project that they clearly don't have the experience to do. And so no, again, it comes back to something earlier we talked about, this constant need to kind of ask customers their opinion. I think there's a role for customer satisfaction surveys and a role for like asking for customer input. But there's, I think that comes to a point pretty quickly early. And I think we've got to lead customers to what we know to be better, as opposed to just, again, sucking up to them and listening to them and saying, yes, we can, you want to make it red? Yeah, we can make it red. No problem. And it's just this constant desire to sort of suck up to customer needs, feeling like you're being quote unquote customer centric, when actually you're just getting batted around like a fly. You're not standing your ground.
So
exactly.
How do you feel about the customer is always right?
Yeah. So personally, as you might imagine, I don't feel like that's true, in particular on issues of product. When it comes to issues of customers dissatisfied for some reason, then yeah, I think that tenet does hold true in the sense that the customer's perception means more than the reality, right? So if the customer perceived that the car would go 0 to 60 in 5 seconds, and clearly it only goes 0 to 60 in 6 seconds, or they perceive it only goes to 0 to 60 in 6 seconds, well, then their reality is probably more important than the actual 0 to 60 speed. So when it comes to issues of satisfaction, I think it is the job of the company to communicate and to deal with the customer so that their perception is that the customer is doing well. So it's just because our job is to convince a customer that what we are promoting, what we're providing them is better. If we fail to do that, then we should be chastised for that. But where I would draw the line is customizing the solution at every turn for each customer has some sort of idiosyncratic kind of desire. That's where I think you run into trouble, or we've run into trouble in the past.
Yeah. No, I'm listening. I hear you. This is good. Just want to ask you a few more questions here. Want to go into the knowledge round. Are you ready, John?
Shoot.
Have you ever wanted to become a highly paid online thought leader in your space? Have you ever wanted to be an author and get that book out? Have you ever wanted to speak on stage about something that you were passionate about and get paid for it? Have you ever wanted to sell courses online passively and wake up to seeing deposits made into your bank account while you were sleeping? So if you're interested in learning how to become a highly paid online thought leader and doing something similar to what I do, then you're going to love this free training I made for you where I share the exact steps I would take to build an online thought leader business if I was going to start all over. Go to kfminfluence.com to get access to this training. Again, that's kfminfluence.com. You see, people kept asking me how I built knowledge for men in a relatively short amount of time. So I created this training for you to save you time and money so that you can go out there and make a massive impact and income in the world doing what matters most to you. Go to kfminfluence.com to get this training now. Welcome to the Knowledge Round, where the guests will be asked rapid-fire questions to give the audience invaluable pieces of wisdom to help transform their lives. Starting in 3, 2, 1, showtime. All right, and the first question I have for you here is, what would you say is really holding people back from getting involved and starting their first business?
The perception that you have to have an innovative or new idea. I love my dad to death. He and I have had many conversations about entrepreneurship, and I've always been he was always a big business guy, and I was always sort of, hey, you should start something of your own, you should start something of your own. And his knee-jerk reaction to me was, well, I don't have an idea. And that used to frustrate me because, Five Guys is an example. You raised Five Guys. What's new about hamburgers? There's nothing new about a hamburger joint. They've been around since we all remember, right? But Five Guys decided to do it different. And I think the biggest misconception, or the biggest sort of thing reason people sit on the edge, is they just don't have an idea. And they get obsessed with having to have the next great idea. Reality is you don't need a great idea. I've just said I would buy a pencil that holds the lead slightly more firmly than a friggin', so no, you don't need a new idea. In fact, new ideas are probably the most dangerous businesses to start because they've never been proven.
Right. So something like Tesla would be very dangerous. And even Elon Musk says in his book, has been quoted many times, that he never thought that it was really going to succeed. He just wanted to create something worthwhile.
Sure. But, going back to your question about what is the biggest thing holding people back, it's this fallacy that they need, quote unquote, an idea to start a business. You don't. Yeah. Great point. And really agree with that. Now, what advice would you give to someone who has maybe too many ideas and they're going from one idea to the next idea and they're not sticking to something and really focusing on that one thing to build it? It's like mental masturbation. I mean, it's the most frustrating person to be around, is that person that always has a new idea, always thinks they've got the next great, whatever, fill in the blank. And you just feel like throttling them and saying, like, pick one and see it through, because I can't stand listening to another idea that you have. So it's a huge bugbear for me. I don't know. I can't remember what the question was. What do you do about people like that?
Yeah. When they're
hanging out with them.
No, but for someone, like, they're just not committing. They got too many ideas and they're not taking action? Is it the idea? Is it really about execution?
I've got a buddy who does exactly this, and he works in a big company. He will always work in a big company because he's never going to pull a trigger on any of his ideas. He has a new idea. He's a brilliant guy, but just can't pull a trigger. And so, I've stopped asking him to talk about his ideas because it just is too frustrating. So, and his perception is that the idea is the most important thing, as was my dad's, and as is many people.
Right.
The idea that it's the idea.
Right.
It's not the idea. It's again, I sound trite in even offering this advice, but it's the execution, right? It's all the hard work is done once you figure out an idea. It's not the idea. It really isn't. You want to start a coffee shop, even though there are more Starbucks on every street corner than you can. There is somebody out there right now starting a more successful coffee shop that will arguably go on to be more successful than Starbucks today, right now, with a new concept, a better way to recruit employees, better way. Like, there's someone doing it right now. So it's not the idea.
Yeah, I think that can be very relieving, and it can give us a lot of hope in that, hey, it's your ability to execute which is going to make or break that freaking idea, because you can give a team of guys who have a proven background in business and they've executed for years, and give them a crap idea and they'll make it happen.
Right.
All right.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
your books here, The Automatic Customer and also Built to Sell and also Drilling for Gold. But what would you say are 3 influential books that you'd recommend for someone wanting to build a successful business?
Small Giants by Bo Burlingham would be one.
Uh-huh.
And if you haven't read, have you read it?
I have not. No, I'm on Amazon. I'm going to add it.
Yeah, that's a great book. It just talks about trying to build a great business as opposed to necessarily a big business. And I think that's such an interesting conundrum. I think so much of our wiring is like bigger is better, right? And it causes, I think, us to want to scale a business and take on venture capital and be able to kind of puff out our chest and say, yeah, we've got 100 employees, or yeah, we've got 10 million in revenue, or whatever the metric is that you think is going to, sound good at a cocktail party. And the reality is that a lot of those businesses aren't financially rewarding for the owner because they've given up so much equity in to create the size, but also aren't necessarily something that is a great enduring business. And so Small Giants talks about just creating great companies that have a really cool product, as opposed to ones that are just the biggest, the fastest growing or whatever.
I really like that.
I'm a huge Small Giants fan. What else? I like Who. Have you heard of Jeff Smart's book Who?
Who? No, I have not.
It's just called Who. He was the guy who wrote the book Top Grading, but he has a whole methodology around recruiting employees, which I like. It's a very tactical book. There's nothing sexy or romantic about it. It's not like you wouldn't take it on with you on vacation unless you were a really, really, really obsessed person. But it's a good practical book on how to hire employees. I like that one. There's a funny book. It's ancient. I don't even know if you get it on Amazon these days, but it's called Confessions of an SOB. And it was written by a guy named Al Newhart. And he was the guy who came up with the idea of USA Today. And this was during the time of like the newspaper heyday, when actually people read newspapers. And he talked about all the shenanigans that was involved in kind of knitting together a network of publishers to actually publish this newspaper. Again, it's probably out of print now, but it was a great business. In fact, one of the first business books I had read and was sort of pretty taken aback by that, but it's going back a long time.
All right. Yeah. Great books here. And final question here. Imagine you had 60 seconds with your 25-year-old self, John. And if you know what you know now, personally, professionally, maybe even in your relationships, what advice would you give to your 25-year-old self? What would you tell him to do? What would you tell him not to do?
It's a great question. I think it would have been pick something. At the time, I was very focused in on this customer-centric way of thinking, kind of loosely defining the business, but like really trying to understand what customers wanted and customizing up the yin-yang, trying to placate every possible customer. And I think I would have just not wasted a lot of cycles by picking a product and kind of being more firm. That I've become much more firm on that notion of leading customers as opposed to listening to them. over the years. And I think as I look at I've had 4 businesses, this is my 5th. I feel like the one we have now is infinitely more valuable, more, just more faster growing, more successful than my first. And I think it's because I'm clear as to what we're doing and also kind of what we're not doing. And we don't fall into that trap of kind of customizing and following customers and being customer centric. Instead, we've sort of got a vision of what we're trying to do. And you like it, great. Here's a sign here. If you don't, that's okay too, but we're not going to change for you.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's really good, because if you're chasing the customer, you're constantly changing, and then you have a new customer that doesn't like what you just changed, and you end up with this sort of Frankenstein business.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of business comes down to numbers, right? So if you talk to 10 people and you get 10 different opinions on what you should do, well, that's interesting. But if you talk to 200 people and you got 12 of them who loved what you do already, well, then you've got a 6% penetration rate. So if you want to get more customers, how many you need to go to, right? You need to talk to 200 people to get 12 of them to say yes. So you can now scale that business up, as opposed to just talking to 10, a very small number of people, and just getting confused by everybody kind of giving you different advice. Or again, I'm a big believer in sort of figuring out what you're doing, and then ask a lot of people to say yes.
Yeah. Really good. Really good. All right. That's going to conclude the knowledge round there, John. Now, what's exciting you today? What's getting you out of bed in the morning?
I've just done this podcast. We're coming up on our 1-year anniversary on our podcast. It's called Built to Sell Radio. And I get to ask an entrepreneur every week about their exit. Like, how did their exit go? I try to get them to break it down, lessons to avoid, or, lessons learned, mistakes to avoid, things that went wrong, negotiation tactics. And it's pretty cool. We've been doing it for a year. And I've had the chance to interview some really cool people, and just had Rod Drury on the show. Rod, you may know, is the founder of Xero, a market cap of $3 billion, Xero being the accounting software. And he talked about an earnout mistake in structuring his earnout in the last company that he sold, where he left, I think it was $30 million on the table. And he could have just changed that by kind of rewording the way his earnout structure. So it was a huge nugget for me personally.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty excited about that right now. It's been a fun show. It's growing. So it's been fun to listen to that. See that.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'll have to check out the show. And for all the listeners here, you can follow up with what John's doing at valuebuilder.com. You can also go into Amazon, check out the Automatic Customer, or also Built to Sell on Amazon. Just put it in Google or put it in Amazon, and John Warrillow pops right up. And John, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your story and lessons here with my community.
Thanks for having me, Andrew.
Thank you for listening to the Knowledge for Men podcast. Hundreds of interviews and millions of downloads later, we're continuing to build an international movement, and we're just getting started. So if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and leave a helpful review in iTunes, because it really helps the podcast grow so we can impact even more men in the world who need this. Guys, this is all about living with purpose, where every day you only do things that matter to you. You wake up, live with purpose, and take massive action towards the life you want. And always remember, love the life you have while creating the life of your dreams. Go to kfmfree.com to get a surprise bonus I've made for my listeners. Again, that's kfmfree.com for something that's changed my life, and I'm offering it to you for free. Also, check out my Amazon best-selling books that I've written for you to help you crush life at kfmauthor.com. Again, that's kfmauthor.com to see all the books I've created to help you break through in life. This is your host, Andrew Farabee, founder of knowledgeformen.com, and I'll see you in the next episode.